Hi, I'm Heather Telford, and today I'm masking a scene with Grafix' incredible Frisket kit. The kit includes the white mask liquid Frisket, a tool for applying it called a dipstick, and an eraser for taking the liquid Frisket off at the end of the project. I'm going to be making this scene using penny black stamps. I'm stamping the birch. The stamp set is called Birches from Penny Black, and I'm stamping it on hot pressed watercolor paper with Nocturne VersaFine Clear ink. What I want is a scene that I look through the birches to. So I'm stamping the birches first. They're going to be in the foreground, and then I'm going to mask them with the liquid Frisket and then have all the scene behind. So that's what the liquid Frisket is going to enable me to do, is have the birches stamped and masked and then be able to paint over and stamp over and not cover those birches at all. So I'm just stamping 2 more birches on the other side. I don't want that single kind of off to the side birch there, so I'm just inking the 2 on the side at a slightly different angle so they lean in and frame the scene that I'm going to create. I let the VersaFine Clear ink dry thoroughly, used the heat tool a little bit and let it dry thoroughly before I came to apply the liquid Frisket, because I don't want to smudge any of the ink with the liquid Frisket. Now the tool that comes with the kit is just a little applicator, and you wet it first. All these instructions are in the instruction leaflet that comes with the kit. You wet it first so that it'll be easy to clean the liquid Frisket off at the end. And this tool has a narrow edge and a wide edge, so you can see I can apply quite a bit of Frisket with it at one time and just move that around. Now I'm covering a stamped image, so I have to stay within the lines here. If you are just painting your own image, this little tool, you could move it around thick edges, thin edges. I'm going to show you also how I use the liquid Frisket sometimes with a brush. With a brush, I just dip it into a little bit of detergent first. That's not necessary with the tool. You just dip that into water. But with a brush, I dip it into a little bit of detergent first before I dip it into the white liquid Frisket, so that I'll be able to clean it easily at the end. So you can see the brush is just helping me apply it because I'm trying to stay in those very distinct lines. I'm not painting any trees of my own. And then I've got tiny little branches here to mask as well. So I've switched to a smaller brush, dipped that in some detergent, picked up the Frisket, and then I can easily paint over those tiny branches. And then just do exactly the same on the second pair of trees. Liquid Frisket takes a little while to dry. I usually leave 10 or 15 minutes, and then you touch it to make sure, and it's tacky and it won't come off on your finger. It's just a tacky, rubbery feeling. I'm going to paint the sky over the whole panel, and I'm using Dr. P.H. Martin's Hydrus watercolor paints, and I'm painting the whole panel with water first so that the paint will really move when I put it down. I'm just using 3 colors, a tiny little bit of quinacridone magenta into the phthalo blue, just to make it a little more of a purpley blue than a turquoisey blue. And then I've got gamboge as my yellow. So primary colors for my sky and ground. And you can see how wet that paper was, because it just meant that the blue moved on the paper. So I've got a really nice fluid look there. You can see my paper is still wet as I put the gamboge paint on the bottom. Then I'm painting that up to meet the blue, and then adding a bit of blue over the top to give myself a green ground there. And then I'm going to create clouds, and I've scrunched up a tissue to remove ink. You can see how it's all just stayed nice and wet because I had a good wet base, and then of course the liquid watercolor on top. And I'm using a tissue to just remove color from the paper, and a couple of tissues because once it's saturated with blue I don't want to reapply the blue, so I'm just scrunching it up and then changing the side of the tissue that I'm applying to the paper, or getting a fresh one so I can remove paint and give myself a cloudy sky. The reason that I didn't use paper towel is because paper towel has a texture. I didn't want texture. I didn't want patterned clouds. So when that was all dry, I was ready to move on to the next step. I'm using a stamp from Penny Black called The Good Life, which has this farm, homestead or barn, I'm not quite sure. Anyway, I'm depicting it as an old building, and so it's going to be grey, like wood that's aged over a few years. And I'm starting by just stamping it with permanent ink. So I'm using archival ink, but in distress colors from Ranger. So I'm using this ink to give myself a base image. I'm going to watercolor over the top, but I want a base image, which just requires me to stamp this a couple of times to give myself all the outlines of both the building and the trees and the fence in the foreground, so that I can then add water-based ink, water-soluble ink, the distress inks, and do some painting over the top as well. So with that image stamped, I'm switching to the dye-based distress markers, peeled paint first over the trees and a little bit of mowed lawn, so I've got variety in the color of my trees. And I've just dabbed that on, so a little spritz of water means that the colors will start blending on the stamp before I press them onto the watercolor paper. Then I can come in with a paintbrush and a little bit of water and just move that paint even more. And you can see there's green ink on the birches, but it's actually on top of the masking. So that means I can guarantee those trees staying white the whole time while I paint on top of them, stamp on top of them. They're going to stay my white, nice white foreground birches. I'm using Hickory Smoke Distress ink. That was the same color that I stamped in the archival ink. And I'm just going to start building this scene up bit by bit. I'm adding my shadows with Black Soot Distress ink from the marker, and then a bit later from the ink pad, just to start defining this building a little bit. There's 2 stories to it. There's a few little doors and gates and additions out the front, so I'm just adding a little bit of black to that to help define the image, and then I can blend that with by picking up a little bit of either Hickory Smoke ink or Black Soot ink, and to continue my painting this image in distress inks. Now this is obviously a summery scene with the trees. Trees are green and blue sky and the green grass, but liquid Frisket is fantastic for creating snowy scenes too. So later in the year I'll be doing that and sharing that in a video as well. But it is my favorite thing to do, I think, with liquid Frisket, is to create snowy scenes with snow falling, splattered Frisket, snow falling, big white moon in the sky, that sort of thing. Liquid Frisket is also ideal for just painting out any white areas that you want to work on later. So I painted out these white birches, and I won't even need to work on them later. They're stamped. But if you have a white area in the middle of a painting, you want to do all the painting first around it and then do the fine detail in that white area at the end, you just paint it first with liquid Frisket, and it's masked for the whole time you're painting the other areas, and then you can remove that frisket and add detail or whatever you need into those white areas at the end. So it's very, very useful tool, and like I said, it can be painted on, it can be drawn on with the tool, it can be splattered on, lots of ways of applying it. Just finishing off my building here with last little bit of definition with the black soot ink and the hickory smoke ink, and just a little bit of shadow on that roof. I've got the foreground fence stamped as well. Now, to remove the liquid frisket, you use this little tool which just grabs at it. So you just start at an edge and it just grabs at it and starts pulling it off. I tend to switch over to pulling it off with my fingers because that's kind of satisfying, but it's great to start it with the tool, or if you don't want to pull it off with your fingers, of course you can use the tool to take the whole lot off. But I like this little satisfying step to reveal my nice white birches behind, and then you can just check and remove any last little bits that didn't come off with the tool, and it's very easy to do. So you can see my birches are nice and white and clean, and they're framing my little country scene perfectly. I turned this into a card, which is what I like to do. Decided not to put any words on it, just really a country scene. I hope you've enjoyed seeing the Grafix Incredible Frisket kit at work. All the supplies are listed below. Thanks for joining me.